Hi, this is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. This is a podcast that we do every so often. We try to do it at least once, if not twice a month, to bring in people like our current guest and others that are specialists in the field that they're in or represent us in the city. So, Eric, I appreciate you being on the show with us.
Glad to be here, Rico. Looking forward to talking with you.
Same here. Eric Christ is a city council member, post two. Has been the city council person, actually, for how long now?
Yeah, so I was first elected, Rico might recall, a special election back in 2016 when our original city council members had resigned to seek a state house office since that
Right.
opened up the seat. And then we had a quick special election. So it's been over 6 years now since I was
Wow.
elected.
It's gone by fast. We're celebrating 10 years this year of the city
Right.
being in existence. So I want to, before we get right into that, let me also say thank you, big thank you, to EV Remodeling Inc., who's a current sponsor of the podcast and has been supporting us not only advertising in our publications, but as a corporate sponsor, helping us, making sure that we have the facility to be able, if you will, to provide good journalism in this community, being able to bring stories and curating the things that go on in our lives here, both through these podcasts, the magazine, and our websites. So visit them. Eli is the owner, and he lives here in Peachtree Corners. EV Remodeling Inc. They've done great work out there, and you certainly should check them out. So now, having done that, let's get into the meat of some of the stuff that's going on. We haven't had a podcast, you and I, in a while, so
Yeah.
this is great to be able to do this. So the first thing I think that we want to, you've been active on Nextdoor every once in a while. I see you on there trying to explain things to people that sometimes post, and things sometimes there are erroneous things out there sometimes factual things. But because so many people are on Nextdoor talking about different developments and stuff like that, facts can be not always facts. There's sometimes misinformation out there. But you've been able to go out there and keep things straight for us, and I appreciate that. But one of the things that you're an advocate of, and I think it's really important, is the ability of residents to be aware of, not just aware, but engaged in the rezoning process. Because there's a lot of it going on. God knows in the last few years, certainly a lot more has been going on. So tell us a little bit, Eric, about how you feel about that and what citizens can do to be aware and engaged in this process.
Happy to do that. And yeah, talking about, my personal philosophy is twofold. One, obviously, everybody's entitled to their own opinion about if a particular project is beneficial to the city, but I think it's important that everybody has the facts. So if on Nextdoor or on Facebook, I see somebody commenting, "I heard they're tearing this down to build this," and setting aside whether what they're building is good or bad, if that's not accurate, that particular comment or the size of the comment or the number of units being developed, you often see me chime in and provide the facts. And just because I'm being on the city council and we work on these things all day long, oftentimes am more familiar with the project or than what somebody else has read on social media, or they were chatting with their neighbor as they're out walking their dogs. So, so that's why you see me active in those areas. But let's talk about the current process and what I think we can do to improve the opportunities for residents to be aware and engage in this process. And this stems from comments. I think in my first year in office, I'd be talking to somebody and they say, "I didn't even know that was being voted on," and that always, affected me to say, well, people need to. I want them to know things are being voted on, because let's say if no one shows up for a public hearing, there's two reasons, right? Potential reasons. One is no one particularly cares about that particular development. It's or they do care, but they didn't know about the meeting, right? And one of the things I like to say is that we don't have all the best ideas or all the ideas sitting up there on the dais at council meetings, and hearing from the community members is an important part of the process. And so we don't have a monopoly on the good ideas. So here, let's talk about how it works today in Peachtree Corners.
Hmm.
So somebody owns a piece of property and they want to apply for a change. And that can be either a change in the conditions that are on the property. So they don't want to change the zoning. Let's say it's
Hmm.
zoned commercial, but there's a condition that says no pet grooming establishments on this property for some
Right.
reason. Normally pet grooming is permitted, but this particular property says no pet grooming. So that's a change in condition. And
Hmm.
then the other one, which is perhaps more significant, is a change in zoning, right? So from commercial to residential, or from residential to commercial,
Hmm.
and what we're seeing a lot of right now in the city is requests to change from generally various types of commercial zoning to what's called mixed use development.
Hmm.
And under our ordinance, mixed use requires 3 or more different kinds of uses, but it does include residential. So today in commercial zoning, like up and down Peachtree Parkway or on Holcomb Bridge, you can do lots of
Right.
different types of uses, but you can't live there. You can have a hotel, but you can't have permanent residency.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of requests for residential developments. So the applicant makes that request, they submit it to the city staff. They have to submit an entire packet with a checklist, and staff goes back to them, says you're missing this thing, you haven't done a traffic survey yet, or so. Once a full packet is accepted, then
Hmm.
they get scheduled for a hearing before the planning commission,
Hmm.
and then a hearing before the city council. And today in Peachtree Corners, while staff will often recommend that they also hold a community meeting before that, they're not required to. So sometimes there isn't a community meeting. So, but you always do have those 2 opportunities for a
Right.
public hearing, right? And let's talk quickly. What's the planning commission versus the city council? City council obviously elected by the voters of Peachtree Corners, 7 of
Hmm.
us, the mayor and 6 council members. The planning commission is appointed by the city council and acts as an additional filter opportunity for public participation in the process. What the planning commission does is makes a recommendation. They don't make binding decisions. So they will hear a request for rezoning, let's say. They will hold a public hearing. They will ask some tough questions of the applicant, of the staff, take the input that they get from the public, both in support or opposition, and then they'll vote on a recommendation. So when it comes to us at the city council, the packet
Right.
will say planning commission recommends approval or recommends denial. And then when it gets to the city council, then we go through that process again, hold a public hearing, staff presents their analysis, and then we vote, and that's the final decision on that. And so
Now,
how go
there
ahead.
is a spot in there when it comes to the city council. There's a first read at one meeting, and then it
Right.
goes to the next city council meeting, and that's where the actual vote and public comments are allowed, right?
Yeah, correct. So because a rezoning is a zoning of each parcel in the city is defined as part of our ordinances, essentially part of the
Hmm.
laws here in the city of Peachtree Corners.
Right.
So a change in zoning is a change in those laws. And under our charter as a city, a change in our laws requires that we announce it at one council meeting. That's the
Right.
first read. And
Hmm.
then we wait till the next council meeting to vote on it. So it's another opportunity for people to be informed. So if they're reading the city council agenda,
Right.
like on Tuesday night coming up, we have a council meeting. You'll see a section on the agenda for first reads. And what it
Hmm.
really just, they read the title. We don't vote. We don't discuss it. There's no
Right.
public hearing. It's just another alert. So one of the things I've been working on to enhance this process and making sure people are aware of it is, what we currently do is when there is a rezoning or a change in conditions on a parcel, the applicant has to post a big yellow sign on the
Hmm.
property. You might have seen big, it's like 3 foot tall by
Right.
3 foot wide or something like that. And it says, this parcel is subject to, hearings, and here's the dates of the planning commission, and here's the date of the city council. Neighbors within a certain distance, so property
Hmm.
owners who abut that property
Right.
within a distance of 500,000 feet are sent a letter in the mail. City council, city staff also puts it on the website. But that's about it. So one of the things I do particularly for people, people who subscribe to my newsletter, is I promote those upcoming events. I want people to know about them. And one of the things I proposed in the past, I didn't get consensus from other council members, but planning to promote it again, is to do something that they do in the city of Sandy Springs, which is to require a community meeting for every rezoning. So not everything that we vote on, but as a city council, but every rezoning. So if you go see one of those yellow signs on a parcel in the city of Sandy Springs, it'll have the community meeting date and the planning commission date and the city council dates. They're all together. They're all on the same page. Yeah.
So is that something the applicant would actually set up a public meeting versus, let's say, in Peachtree Corners, usually United Peachtree Corners Civic Association is the host of a public meeting of that sort?
Yeah, so the civic and the way they do it in Sandy Springs is they don't specify how you do the community meeting. Like, do you want to have the Peachtree Corners Civic Association at their meeting do it? You just have to have one. You have to capture an attendance sheet, and you have to take notes from the meeting. And Sandy Springs, they actually require 2 community meetings, one before Planning Commission and one between Planning Commission and City Council. So for everyone, and the other thing they say, and Sandy Springs is a little bit bigger than us, that they're fairly stretched out. One of the meetings has to be in the same council district as the project, and the second meeting could be somewhere else. That's not as relevant to us here in Peachtree Corners. We're fairly compact, 16 square miles. But so that's one of the things I'll be working on in the upcoming months, is can we adopt some elements of what Sandy Springs does to make sure that there's a community meeting component as well.
It is, even with people that know sort of or feel they're aware of things going on, are not always aware of things going on, right? It's a good thing that you have a newsletter. In fact, how can someone subscribe to that newsletter? We should say that.
Yeah, what's the best way to get the link to subscribe? Actually, if you go to Facebook, just Christopher City Council on Facebook, there's a link there to subscribe to the newsletter. Or you can just drop me an email at echrist@peachtreecornersga.gov, which you can find on the city website. Happy to add folks to that.
Excellent. So if people do that, they'll get the same newsletter I get, which is really informative. Even I, who publish these magazines, don't always know every single thing going on. And I'm like, wow, I wish I knew that, So I love your newsletter. So keep it up. But what I find too is that, people are starving for stuff. The good thing about the web is that you can see the traction of certain types of stories. So as much as I like putting out stuff about restaurants and other things, the biggest hits, the very biggest hits that we get is on developments and rezonings, and people want to know what's going on. I mean, the changes coming to Peachtree Corners with the forum, that piece had legs, not only when it first was put out a month ago, but when we started reposting it again on social media to let people be aware of it, it was the top read piece on the website, and we get a decent amount of traffic. So, people do want to know what's going on.
There's an example of one. So, like the forum being so critical to the economic vitality of Peachtree Corners, that was one where not only did I, point out in my newsletter, hey, these public hearings are coming up. I attended the community meeting, along with about 200, folks there. And I wrote up my notes, what I heard the applicant saying, and shared those in my newsletter and also on Nextdoor. And I got a lot of engagement about that. People were, because there was some, and once again, this was just my impression of what I heard. This wasn't Eric speaking. This was Eric's notes from what North American Properties had said in terms of what exactly were they doing related to parking in the forum and a hotel, and then of course the one that gets people's ears most perked up is adding a residential component to the forum. right?
Right.
And
So the interesting part, I was at that meeting too, and I had a reporter there, and we unashamedly took your map from your newsletter, by the way, that you posted on Nextdoor. Unashamedly, I redid the map a little bit because that just had to, but it had all the same information you had, and it pointed out all the same information that you pointed out, and it just made things easier for people to
sure,
understand where everything was going. Um, and speaking about that, there's going to be a first read coming up at this city council meeting for the forum mixed use, which is it's a request for rezoning. If I read the short
right,
part here, request for rezoning 44 acres from C2 commercial to retail, to MUD to mixed use development to allow for this new mixed use, which is that parcel, which is the forum.
right,
Um,
right.
and that will allow, because of the mixed use structure, allow the apartments to be put there and the hotel, which I think still could have been put there, but that probably would have required
Yeah,
some adjustments.
yeah. Well, generally in C2, a hotel is permitted, but staff, when they researched it, that discovered that when the forum was the property was first rezoned to permit the development of the forum, it was zoned light industrial back in the day. So in the late
Right,
90s, when it was converted into from M1 light industrial to C2, which is mid-level commercial, they did include a condition that no hotels. So
really? Okay.
right, so the North American properties, you're right. So they're now coming to the city. They've taken feedback from the community meeting, and they've made requested two changes. One is a change in conditions to
Hmm.
permit a hotel,
Right.
and the second is to rezone the 44 acres. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to redevelop every piece of the 44 acres.
Hmm.
That's the parcel they own. That's how big it is, and they want to change its zoning from C2
Right.
commercial to mixed use, which is, for example, mixed use is what the town center is zoned. So
Right.
the
Right.
the restaurant and the retail and the movie theater, all of, and even the townhomes, so that all that parcel, that's the town center, that's
Right.
zone mixed use, which
And
is you know,
right, which is interesting because really, when you look at it, they're owned by different. Right, the retail is owned by Fuqua, the town center is owned by, and the parking deck is owned by the city, and I think those townhomes are owned by a different developer also, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
Or
well,
is it?
now they're actually owned by individual property owners. All of them have been
Well, right,
sold. So, right,
correct,
so they're all
correct.
but they're all but the zoning underneath the townhomes, underneath the restaurants, underneath the
Right.
parking deck, the foundational zoning is mixed use development, right?
So going back to, let's go back to the forum for a minute, because that
Sure.
is probably the biggest thing going on, as far as that would affect the community with regard to that retail space, because of I think it was at my last count, 14 or 16 empty storefronts, and now that North American Properties took it over, they feel, having interviewed Tim Allen there, um,
Tim Perry.
uh, Tim Perry, thank you, Tim Allen. From Home Improvement. Tim Perry,
Right.
yes, thank you. He's doing an improvement also, so maybe that was it. But having interviewed him as well and speaking to his staff, I mean, they want to be able to put density there because density, as everyone sees in all these developments, is important, right? It brings that the apartment versus condo, let's say, density that these places need, right? The philosophy is that the residential with apartments has a better turnover, and because of that, has a better is better for retail versus equity ownership.
Well,
Right?
yeah, I don't know that was specifically rental versus listening to, and this is Tim Perry, North American Properties.
Mm-hmm.
This is from his presentation last week. Or last week, no, this week on Tuesday night they presented
Right.
to Planning Commission, right? And so
Right.
I had the opportunity to attend and listen. And what he talked about from their perspective as looking to create a vibrant retail, restaurant, shopping center and maintain it, that you want people who live for years and years nearby,
Mm-hmm.
which we have, Amberfield,
Right.
Peachtree Station. We got
Sure.
lots of single family homes.
Uh-huh.
Uh, you want people who live there, but perhaps turn over a little more frequently, like in an apartment style setting. They're there for 1, 2, 3 years. And you also, ideally, you want people who are only there for a day or two with a hotel.
Correct.
And the reason they talk about looking for that mix of users, of customers, is that, as you know, Rico, some we get bored with the same restaurants, right? If we how many
Yes.
times, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they felt that, or they feel that it's important that having, people who are staying at a hotel are all fret every night they're new, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
going out to eat. People who are living in the apartments, they turn over every 2 to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you also do need your repeat regular customers as well, who are coming to Home Goods more
Mm-hmm.
often or frequently, right? If you're living in a single family detached
Right.
home in the area. And then the other thing that he talked about is having that mix of potential customers helps activate the property from early in the morning till later in the evening, right? So that if
Right.
your people are living out the property, then they're
Mm-hmm.
stopping to get a cup of coffee or a bagel before they head off to work. When they
Right.
come back home in the evening, so that changes it from a 10. Right now, the forum starts to get going in the morning about 10 a.m. ish, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then, but by about 7 o'clock at night, it's pretty quiet,
Yeah. Yeah.
except on Friday and Saturday nights. And
Yeah.
they would love to see that more from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Having people there and that from his comments, what they view that as, that also attracts retailers and
That's right.
say, hey, this isn't something where, because retailers, and I'm not, that's not my business, but from listening to all the various presentations we had over the years of city council, retailers are very picky about who they want to locate next to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are your anchor tenants? What other do you have? Do you have competitors of mine? I don't want to be there,
Right.
but I want to be near other stores that attract the same type of buyers,
Right.
customers that I'm
Right.
looking for, right? If I'm
Right.
in women's apparel, then I want to make sure that I'm not the only women's apparel store in that shopping
Mm-hmm.
center. I want to have a couple, right? And
Well, yeah.
like
Uh,
he was talking about Lululemon
right.
athletic apparel,
Mm-hmm.
primarily women's, but there's men. They have men's as well. It has been as a little pop-up store, they call it, for a
Right.
while, but now that based on what they're seeing with the forum and the investment, they are, I don't know if they've signed it yet, but my understanding is they're intending to take a permanent larger space
Right.
uh, at the forum. And that's what North America was looking to do, is curate that mix of retail restaurant. And they feel residential is an important component.
And I think their experience in it is important too, because right, Avalon, Atlantic Station, some of the
Right.
other properties they have, Colony Square, I think was another one they have,
Yep.
and the fact that those tenants in those places know NAP, they know North American Properties, they know what they want to do, and they'll probably more likely be willing to move to invest, if you will, in space then at the forum, because they know what North American Property has done at these other locations and what they want to do here. Um, and I think so. The density of the apartments in that mixed use at the forum is close to, I forget what it was now, 300 units maybe, or 260.
No, on the forum itself. So on the forum side of Peachtree Parkway,
Right,
what they proposed at Planning Commission was 381 units.
381. Okay.
And because from a density, the way the density calculation works is you divide 381 into the total size of the property. So you divide into 40
Sure.
acres, and it's not particularly dense at that level, right? I mean but their plan is to put, if the council approves it in August, the residential buildings would be on Peachtree Parkway, so
Hmm.
as far away from like the Amberfield side of the forum as possible. Be not right up against Peachtree Parkway, but it would be built on top of the upper parking lots behind Barnes and Noble,
Right.
behind um,
In fact,
Chipotle.
there's a rendering in that packet that shows it like an
Right,
L shape. It actually is the back half maybe of where Barnes and Noble is, because part of
right.
that building will become apartments. So it's an L shaped that way. And then on the other side of it, of call it the Forum Boulevard, on the other side would also be um, units as well. I think coming
Yeah,
up to Peachtree Parkway.
correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
on the other side, on the what do we call that? The mojito side, or the where the bridge,
right,
where the pedestrian bridge comes across,
right,
would be the hotel, and about a third of the apartment units.
right, right.
Would
And
would,
the in
would
the hotel, how many units? I think it was certainly
they said they hadn't finalized it just yet. But it's in the 125 to 175 range, so let's call it
okay.
150.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
One of the interesting things that I took away, they have a hotel up at Avalon, right? And so
Mm-hmm. Yep.
they once again, based on their experience, they're seeing apartments, long-term residents like we have at the townhomes across the street or at Amberfield
Mm-hmm.
behind. But having that hotel is an important part of the mix. That only about a third, I think he said 35% of the people at the hotel arrive by car all the way
Really?
up at Avalon. 65% don't bring a car. They're coming by Uber or Lyft or some other way, right? Somebody
Okay.
I had a question. I did, well, how many cars?
Interesting.
Well, so if you say 150 rooms, so
Yeah.
a third of 150, that's 50 cars, right? Is coming from the hotel component type of thing.
Interesting.
The
Probably
other
from the
thing,
airport, I bet.
yeah, the other thing
Or something.
he shared is that at Avalon, where they have over 500 rental units, the median age, so half the people
Mm-hmm.
are older than 53, and that the average household income for the apartment units is like over $200,000. So that it's because they've been talking that their focus, their target market is not families, because who wants
Right.
to raise a family in a one-bedroom apartment,
Right.
but is young professionals, singles,
Mm-hmm.
or just married couples, or then at the other end of the life cycle is couples who've sold their 5,000 square foot home in Peachtree Station but aren't ready to
Mm-hmm.
leave Peachtree Corners just yet, and they want to have the convenience of the lock and leave, and not worrying about a
Right.
yard maintenance and those types of things. So
Yeah,
uh,
for sure.
and those stats board out. The other thing he shared was that of those 500 apartments, there's one school age child, so that a school bus comes to Avalon and it picks up one child out of 500 apartments.
Interesting. Now, obviously, Alpharetta is a little different from us, but
Right.
I can see that. And quite frankly, I mean, coming up on 41, I mean, if people can't afford to live in the city inside the perimeter, we're not that far from work inside the perimeter,
Right.
right?
Right.
And plus, if we continue to grow the way we are, and intuitive robotics is just the beginnings of what we're seeing as far as businesses wanting to build out in Peachtree Corners of that type of nature, a high tech work, then you're definitely talking about higher income, right? I mean, at some point, there's also the idea of affordable housing that has to be here in Peachtree Corners, but I believe we have some of that, at least, if not equity ownership.
Yeah, we don't have any like city mandated. We on no development project to date have we required a developer to set aside a certain percentage of the units. And the way that generally works is that you take the median income or the poverty level, and you set up a
Mhm.
max above that, and then using the rule of thumb that you don't want to be spending more than 25 to 30% of your annual income on your housing expenses,
Mhm.
so that you can set some rental targets. But we don't have any of that in the city. There might be some state or federal mandates on certain projects, but the city has not required an affordable component to any
Yeah.
projects.
Is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've talked about a couple times. I think there's and once again, I'm only speaking for myself, right? Every
Sure.
council member is
Yeah. Yeah.
goes through their own analysis. That we have a diversity, a variety of employment opportunities in the city, and which is
Mhm.
a good thing, right? Whenever you have limited variety of housing types, employment types, then as the market conditions change, you can get into trouble, right? If you're
Right.
having a housing recession or a employment recession and different employment types. And so one of the things we have in the city is opportunities for people to work at restaurants and retail, and we need those employers to be able to have workers, right? You know, and those folks aren't buying a 600,000
No.
dollar house, particularly as a young single, working at Lazy Dog or something. And if they have to drive from too far away, so what can we do to make sure we can support all of the employment needs that we have in the city, while also providing, the quality of life that people expect, and why they chose to come to Peachtree Corners.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, I'll go to the local Dunkin' Donut, and every once in a while, the lady says, "Do you know anyone that wants to work?" It's just impossible to get people to work, even at, I don't know, $15 an hour, $12 an hour. I know that's not a living wage per se, but even kids are not even like.
Well, yeah. So like my neighborhood pool here, Neely Farm, is desperate for lifeguards. The company that we use each year, we said we want lifeguards for this many hours, and we can't do that. I can maybe get you Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I can't staff. I don't have enough lifeguards to work, just because right now there's an abundance of job opportunities.
I guess so. Some people just don't want to work and take the summer off, and they go into college after that. Young kids. So, I mean, as far as there's another actually mixed use that wants to come on. It's Innovation Lofts. That's almost like 4 acres, and that's a mixed use, multifamily residential on Peachtree Corner Circle.
Right. So that's the vacant property behind the Chase Bank. So that's right on the town center side of the street. So that's where the density calculation makes a little more sense, right? Because if you take 250 units into 4 acres, and so that one, as you recall, or you might remember, way back in 2017, that same parcel had been rezoned for a potential hotel/apartment complex that then got derailed by COVID, and financing didn't come through, and that zoning reverted back to just general C2. So that's somebody's looking at that parcel. And I think what we're seeing in general, Rico, is throughout the city, developers are looking for properties that are either vacant, which we don't have a lot of in the city anymore, or underutilized, a vacant office building, or a office building with a huge parking lot that a third of it gets used. And what's hot right now, the applications that we're getting are not for office buildings, other than some isolated things like Intuitive Surgical building out a corporate campus there on Technology Parkway, or some work in Technology Park on an office building. So we're not getting office buildings. We're definitely not getting retail. Lots of retail applications. No one's putting up a new shopping center in the world of e-commerce. What we are getting a lot of is residential. And because what we have left available to build on in the city are smaller parcels, to make it for economic sense, you can't, building 3 single family homes on 2 acres or something. From a developer's perspective, the most recent single family home, I don't know if you've been over in Winter's Chapel, there actually is, there was a little bit of land right there, and the owners, it was already zoned appropriately, so that one didn't come before the city council. It was already zoned for single family homes. He's put in a little cul-de-sac, and I think it's 9 lots, 7 lots, something like that.
And was that R60, I think, or 60 foot?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so so you could fit R60, 60 foot wide at the street side. So we don't have big tracts of land available for single family homes. So what developers are coming to us now is apartments, and as the saying goes, we're not making any more land, but we keep making people. So and we have a tremendous nationally housing shortage right now. That the number of new housing units of all types, townhomes, single family detached
It's
duplexes.
right. It's mainly equity ownership. That's really the problem. There's not enough single family homes to go around. I mean, now they're talking. There's news reports now. All of a sudden, the angle is Americans are moving to Europe, to Greece, and to Italy because the dollar is on par with the euro,
Czar. Yep.
and
Yep.
you could probably buy, like, I think the last thing I saw was somewhere in Greece, small towns, granted, 3,600 square foot home for like $80,000. Um, but you have to put up with whatever energy crises they may have, and instabilities of governments. Not that we might not have our own issues sometimes,
Right.
but yeah. So people are moving, are deciding what they want to do. Where if they want ownership, I think a lot of, I don't know if you get this, Eric, but some of the young people I talk to don't even feel they can buy a house, or that it makes sense to even buy a house now. And certainly with the rates going higher, they're thinking, you know what, I'll just keep renting for the time being because I don't see anything happening. And there may be
Yeah.
a market
Yeah, I
bust
think
at some point.
some of that is hopefully temporary. I mean, the pandemic created a sort of a housing freeze, essentially, as
Mm,
lots of people wanted to move into a single family house, but the
yeah,
owners of those houses aren't selling because they didn't
right,
know where they were going to go, or who knew what was going to happen with the pandemic. And
right.
looks like we're it's coming moving sort of from a pandemic to more of endemic, meaning it's still
Mm,
with us, and there's still things we
hmm
need to be doing to protecting ourselves and our loved ones. But uh, there are people living in Peachtree Station who are empty nesters, and their kids are
right,
long gone, and
right.
they don't want 5,000 square feet. They don't want to be maintaining a yard. But until both the buyers and the sellers both start going back to sort of normal levels, yeah,
Right.
yeah, it
Yeah,
it, it
because otherwise you sell your house and then you have to buy something somewhere else, and it's like, what are you going
right.
to buy then at that point? Right? You might
Yeah,
as
so I
well.
was talking to a neighbor here in Neely Farm who's a real estate agent. And I said, well, how have you been able to sell the homes so far? And he said, well, most of my sales have been because the owners already had somewhere else to go. They already
Right.
had a
Second.
place in Florida.
Hmm.
We had neighbors
Yeah.
here in Neely Farm, been here 30 years. And about 3 years ago, they bought a place in Florida. So they said,
Okay.
hey, market's hot. Let's just finally sell this home. But they already had a place to go, right? So
So that's
everybody
not
else who didn't
surprising.
didn't have a place to go is going, well. And that's the question, is if they're not ready to leave Peachtree Corners yet, but
Yeah.
they're ready to sell, and because we have families with young children who want to move in, they're chomping at the bit. They'll
Yeah.
sell like that. Is the question is, will other types of housing options, like potentially, well, like the townhomes at the town green, sold out
Hmm.
lickety
Oh my
split,
God. They were
right?
all over $750,000, and I understand some of them actually rent for 3,600 a month. So who
Well,
can
there
pay
you,
that
yes,
rent is unbelievable. So,
right. So the question is, one of the things we've heard from the consultants is that people want to live in Peachtree Corners, and
mhm,
all income levels want to be here, need to be here from a work perspective, and that
right.
if they can't find a place to rent in an apartment, then
Mhm.
they'll go team up and they'll go rent a home, essentially. And
Yes.
three folks will get together and they'll be
Yes.
renting inside a single family subdivision.
Yeah.
And the consultant, this is the consultant's words, if you don't provide enough variety and volume of the different types of housing stocks, then you'll potentially get uses that you
Correct.
uh, didn't anticipate, and might create
Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah.
When you're living in the middle of Amberfield and the house next to you has three people splitting
Right.
it as a
Right.
rental.
So there's a company, I think, in Atlanta that's called Pad Split or something like that.
Right,
And they do that. That's their specialty. They'll split your house up, rent a bedroom with a bathroom or just a bedroom and whatever. And you
right,
could get, like you said, three or four different people in that same house that aren't related. Now, the rules, obviously, in any rezoning says you have to be related, but there's really no way, unless you're going to go in and check everyone's passport or something and say, are you all related?
right.
There's
Well,
just no way of
yeah, and
doing
so,
that.
yeah. So in the city of Peachtree Corners, one of the provisions we do have, which helps us there a little bit, is that we don't permit short-term rentals.
Right.
So anything less than a month is
Hmm.
prohibited. So that so an Airbnb for 7 nights
Right.
is not permitted in Peachtree Corners, and we do have a limit on the total number of unrelated people. But you're right, we can't
No.
enforce that.
Correct.
If if a complaint is made and code enforcement stops by and they see 6 different cars in the driveway and they go talk, knock on the door, who they're going
Hmm.
to then go talk to next is the owner, right? Because the obligation to stay in compliance with our ordinance is not the renters, or the
Right.
people in that, it's the property owner.
Sure.
And we did have a situation in Peachtree Station where pad split, where a property owner had bought or owned the property, had moved away, wanted to rent it, had hired somebody who then used pad split to rent it out. And once code enforcement got in touch with that owner and said, you can't do this in Peachtree Corners, she okay, and so she complied. And as those
Oh,
tenants,
okay.
as their rent leases came up, she moved them on, and
Interesting.
fired that property manager that she'd hired, who'd gotten her into a pad split situation.
Yeah, and I guess part of it is also people are looking to replace income and stuff like that too. So I think part of it's that, right? So
Sure.
they might have lost a job, or there might be other things going, pressing on them that they need to get more
Yeah.
money, and it's easy to use your property that way, right?
Yeah, and just to be clear, like today, if in Peachtree Corners, if you have an in-law suite, you
Hmm.
can rent that out. What not for less than 30 days. You can't do a short-term rental, but that's a slightly different situation, right? That's where you have the owners living in a big house and they've got an
Correct.
in-law suite with it, and they rent to a college student, or they rent
Right.
to somebody who works as a nanny, or somebody who works at the town center or
Yeah.
something.
The-
That's a little different than 4 or 5 people doing a split
yeah,
on
yeah.
a
One in each bedroom. Yeah. No, I
right.
get it. Feels like
Right.
a college dorm room then. Um,
Right.
right. So what about this is something else I think Norcross might have been looking into. I don't know. It's the accessory housing. I don't know if that ever has come up here or not. That's
Yeah,
some
yeah,
people would look at tiny houses, I guess would
yeah,
be.
so yeah, that hasn't come before us yet, but a couple times a year I attend training sessions put on by the Georgia Municipal Association,
Hmm.
and most recent session I went to was a class on trends on urban and suburban design, and some of
Right.
the changes happening. And yeah, we're seeing um, uh, we, some of the trends that they pointed out are things like accessories, having a carriage house, on back
Right.
of your property, and just, what does the long-term future look like, 30, 40, 50 years from now?
Hmm.
As I said, we got increasing population, and
Right.
where is everybody going to live?
Right.
And we, and so those are certainly things that future councils will be wrestling
Right.
with for many years to come.
So that is something that obviously council people like you get constant education on, and being able to look at what the trends are, and what other cities are doing locally.
Yeah, yeah, I think, and it's important for us to try to stay a little bit of ahead of the curve, so that
Hmm.
because it's always tougher to put an ordinance in place after, that if you already have
Right.
people doing X, Y, or Z, like the council, the Airbnb, or the prohibition on short-term rentals predates even me on the council. That's something they adopted fairly early on in the city's history, and it's obviously easier to do it when not many people are,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
viewing this as beneficial. And I'm sure, Rico, there still are short-term rentals happening in the city, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
we can't, yeah. But when it becomes a problem for the neighbors, we have the ordinance in place to address the situation.
So before we get too far, well, we're
Yeah,
already 44 minutes into our podcast, but so let's tie this up with, maybe let's talk about the SPLOST that's going to
sure.
be that the city had voted on in a special meeting about being part of the upcoming SPLOST that's voted on in November. So tell us about that, what that means.
Right,
And we already have a SPLOST. This would just be a continuation of it.
right. Yeah,
of that 1 penny. But tell us a bit about that.
sure. Yeah, so in Gwinnett County, we actually have two SPLOST. SPLOST, for those folks who don't know, is a special purpose local option sales tax. So we have an e-SPLOST, an education SPLOST. That's a 1% or one penny sales tax that's sponsored by or championed by the school board. So the e-SPLOST, that's 1 penny. All that whenever you buy something in Gwinnett County that's covered by sales tax, at the retail store, at the gas station, whatever it might be, 1 penny of the sales tax is, if I remember, get my numbers right, 4 pennies, 4 cents, 4% of the sales tax. 4 of the 6% sales tax goes to the state. The state has a sales tax. And then in Gwinnett County, we have an educational SPLOST that goes to the school board. And then we also have a regular SPLOST, another penny, and that one's organized by Gwinnett County. And it's driven by the county, so they set the schedule. And so the last time they did a SPLOST was 6 years ago in 2016. They can choose how long they want to have it run before it has to be renewed. So in 2016, November 2016, we voted on a 6-year SPLOST. And that said that for the next 6 years, we're going to pay a penny or 1% on everything we buy, and that goes to the county. And then the county distributes it to the cities. So this upcoming SPLOST, the current SPLOST, we voted on it in November 2016. It passed by a pretty strong margin. It runs through March of 2023. So then it expires. So the Board of Commissioners has recently voted to say, well, let's put it on the ballot again this November. So in the general election, November, whatever that is, 2nd, whatever the general election is this year, don't quote me on that one. First Tuesday in after the first Monday in November, there'll be a referendum, and it says, do the voters approve extending or continuing the 1 penny SPLOST, the county SPLOST, for another 6 years. Mm-hmm. And the estimates are that if that's approved, that would generate approximately $1.35 billion in revenues over the 6 years. And then what happens is the county keeps 75% of that. 25% of it goes to the cities, and then the cities divvy up the 25% based on population. So Rest Haven, with its 64 residents, gets like $18,000 to help maintain their road, their one road. And the city of Peachtree Corners, we're the biggest by population, we will get an estimated $57 million over the 6 years. And as part of the SPLOST referendum process, all of the beneficiaries, all the recipients of the SPLOST revenues have to provide the voters with some guidance. Here's how we plan to spend the money. Mm-hmm. And so the county said, hey, we're going to do these transportation projects. We're going to build these libraries. We're going to do these things. And each of the 16 cities had to do the same thing. And so we had come up with some buckets of how we're going to use the money. And one of the categories we used, the heading, the title of the category, one of the county attorneys didn't like the wording of it, even though our attorney said, well, that's one of the approved uses under state law, but to make the county attorney happy. And we weren't, like 4 of the cities had used the same category. It's called capital outlays. And they asked us to be a little bit more specific in terms of that heading. And so we did have to do a special called meeting just to vote on renaming the buckets, or what bucket names we're going to use. So the plan for Peachtree Corners is the vast majority of that $57 million would be spent on transportation related projects. So that's road construction, road maintenance, repaving, sidewalks, trails, pedestrian connectivity, crosswalks, all that sort of thing. We did put some money in there as well for parks and a green space type acquisition.
Okay. Recreational, cultural facilities.
Recreational, and those general categories, right? And so, like cultural facilities, the city, we have a vision of some point when we can find the right piece of land and get enough funding put together for it, a performing arts center of some kind, most likely through a public-private partnership that we would fund part of it, and there'd be some private component too. But so those types of of categories of what we've allocated the funds towards.
Okay. Well, good to know then. And of course, I'm all for an arts center. Love to see a theater. The city does own about 6 or 7 acres, I think, by town center. I think it's by the
It does.
roundabout.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Where the path to fitness is,
Yes.
if you
Yes.
walk through there, and where we have extended the multi-use trail, that's one a potential place. The
Yeah.
other thing I'd love to see is some activities here in District 2, specifically along the Holcomb Ridge corridor.
Yes.
To
Absolutely.
right revitalize that. So
Yeah.
is there an aging strip shopping center that
Hmm.
through a public-private partnership we could use some SPLOST money, if not from an art center, but to turn something into green space or some other sorts of public amenity,
Yeah.
or along what we call outer Peachtree Corners Circle. So Peachtree Corners Circle between Holcomb Ridge and PIB,
Great.
where we have a lot of residents, but very few public amenities along that stretch. There's, other than a
Actually, you're right.
standard width sidewalk, there's nothing much to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
along there. So
Yeah. Cool. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Eric, how would they reach you, or where would they follow you on?
sure, yeah. So you can find me on Facebook, Facebook/ Christopher City Council. You can reach me at my city email address, echrist, ECHRIST at peachtreecornersga.gov. Or if you can't remember that, just go to the city website and go find the list of council members, and they have my email address there. And just drop me an email. Give me a little time to respond. This is a part-time job for us city council members. We all have full-time occupations otherwise, but I'll respond and get in touch.
A lot of respect for people that have run for office and do this work, because I know very well how it can be crazy. Certainly, the amount of work you have to put in isn't just the meetings that you're attending, or that you need to attend, the city council meetings and stuff, but it's all the stuff you do outside that, right? Public meetings that you have to attend, answering things on Nextdoor, being proactive that way, doing continuing education like you have done on urban development and stuff. I mean, it takes, I think if people understood the amount of time and effort it takes to do your work, the city, being as a city council person, and still do a full-time job and make a living and pay the bills and stay with your family and not be, you're sacrificing quite a bit. So I
Sure.
appreciate the work you do.
Yeah, we do get a small stipend, about $600 a month from the
Right.
city, from the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And as when I was considering running for office and talking to some folks, well, Eric, the only thing you have to do is show up for the 2 council meetings each month. And well, no, I mean, yeah, I guess I could not reply to any email or not take any
Right.
phone calls, but that wouldn't be much of a city councilman. So I certainly personally feel it's important to reach back out. And if somebody's listening to this and you say, hey, I sent you an email and you didn't respond, Eric, my apologies. Please send it again. Sometimes they drop off the bottom of my list, and I don't spot them.
Appreciate the work you're doing, Eric. Thank you. And everyone else listening to this podcast, appreciate you, coming to us either through these podcasts, the magazine, or our website, or our newsletter, to get to know what's going on in the city. We are working on our next issue of Peachtree Corners magazine. We have several good, powerful articles in there about some of the overview of the marketplace development that's going on and stuff. So check that out. Go to livinginpeachtreecorners.com. You can find out more information there as well. And you should be going to the city's website and sign on to the city newsletter as well. And of course, we're all on social media, so find us there. Find the city stuff there on Instagram and Facebook as well. Thank you again to our sponsor, EV Remodeling, Inc., for being a sponsor of these podcasts and this publication. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Eric, for being with us.